Yusuke Urameshi is the greatest shonen anime protagonist of all time. Maybe even the greatest protagonist in anime as a whole. From his style to his mannerisms, Yusuke is just levels above the rest. But his emotional growth is one of the greatest journeys I've ever seen a character go through. What sets Yusuke apart from other shonen MCs is his character is grounded in reality. Aside from his demon origin and his spirit powers, his beginnings and tribulations are unfortunately relatable for a lot of people growing up. Yusuke grew up with an alcoholic mother and an absentee father. Never having a true sense of family, Yusuke entered his adolescence already broken. And what's sad is many kids grow up with this family dynamic and can relate to Yusuke. No one cared for Yusuke in his home life, so he acted out to get attention. He put on this tough guy persona because there was no one there for him. Everyone in his life saw Yusuke as a nuisance. The teachers didn't want him around, and they went out of their way to try and expel Yusuke. Even the kids at school are too scared to be associated with Yusuke in fear of being seen as a troublemaker as well. This made it really hard for Yusuke to connect with anyone, always feeling like an outsider. Yusuke went through life alone, and that made his heart grow cold. Growing up in school, I would often see kids that reminded me a lot of Yusuke, and I never had any sympathy or compassion for them. I just thought these kids had no manners and they're just being a nuisance. It wasn't until I was in my adult years that I could see that these kids were just like Yusuke, coming from broken homes and trying to make sense of the cards they were dealt with. But fortunately for Yusuke, there were people who refused to leave him alone. Keiko and Principal Takanaka. Keiko, being Yusuke's childhood friend, was the only one who knew who the real Yusuke was. She genuinely cared about Yusuke's well-being, and in turn she was the only person Yusuke truly respected. Then we have Principal Takanaka, who understands Yusuke's difficult home life and, like Keiko, wants the best for Yusuke. But Yusuke's experiences with adults hasn't exactly been all that great, so he had a difficult time trusting or listening to anything that Principal Takanaka had to say. Then enters Kuwabara. Kuwabara is another delinquent troublemaker who sees Yusuke as a rival and friend. However, Yusuke is totally oblivious to Kuwabara's feelings and just sees him as another guy who needs his ass kicked. It wasn't until Yusuke died that he saw that other people cared about him. At his funeral, we see Keiko crying. She is weeping with her friends and is in total disbelief that Yusuke is dead. Principal Takanaka comes to pay his respects and just says, "If only you listened to me, you had such a bright future, it's so sad that you're gone." And he was shedding tears. And then we see Kuwabara literally just making the biggest scene trying to fight a dead Yusuke, and it just can't fathom the fact that Yusuke has moved on. And Yusuke is watching this with Botan, saying that people actually care about him, and he thought his whole life he was alone, but there were just 3 people right there that he meant something to. And his thought process began to change, and he was understanding that there might be something worth living for. After Yusuke came back to the world of the living, Koenma and Botan made him a spirit detective, so he would do good and protect the earth, and through his spirit detective adventures, he formed bonds for the first time in his life. And adding to his circle of very few and far between friends, we had arguably the greatest foursome in fiction, being Hiei, Kurama, and Kuwabara. These 4 operated as a team, but all had their own agenda. And they did nothing but get on each other's nerves, but these outcasts started to feel at home with one another. Yusuke was happy for once, but he still decided to keep them all at a comfortable distance so he wouldn't get hurt. During one of Yusuke's spirit detective missions, he got to meet his teacher and mentor, Genkai. And Genkai said it best when she said,
"It's time you bit the bullet and started caring about something with all your heart and energy. But you can't care about it if you're always holding yourself back in case it doesn't work out. Concentrate on what's important, Yusuke. Then commit to it all the way."
And this is one of my favorite speeches in all of anime. All the angst, worries, and fears about relationships summed up in a brutally honest gut punch. Relationships are what makes life worthwhile, but at the same time they are terrifying. The people who bring you meaning to your life can just as easily take it away. And Yusuke, who only knew life without relationships, was scared to open up in fear that people would hurt him. It is easier to go through life alone if that's all you know. Yusuke has always been scared of opening up in fear of losing it all one day, and that fear was reinforced when we met Toguro. Toguro's introduction was nothing short of horrifying. For the first time in Yusuke's life, he found an opponent that actually terrified him. None of the demons and none of the monsters he ever fought terrified him like Toguro. And it's because Toguro and Yusuke are so much alike. Toguro was the strongest adversary Yusuke ever met, and he was able to attain all this strength and power on his own. Yusuke has come from a life of just relying on himself, and just when he was about to change and start relying on other people, Toguro entered and shook him to his core. Toguro was walking down a road that was completely parallel to Yusuke, and Yusuke found comfort in the fact that there are other people just like him. Yusuke even said during the Dark Tournament,
Somewhere inside, I respected you, you know that? Let's just say I haven't had many older guys to look up to. And what you seem to have going, it didn't look so bad. Genkai told me over and over again how stupid I was. But I saw your strength, and how no one could boss you around no matter what.
But even so, Yusuke worked hard to disprove Toguro, but somewhere deep down, Yusuke was still doubting himself. Yusuke worked so hard to get stronger and stronger, but Toguro was still looming over him. And all of Yusuke's self-doubt just revealed that Yusuke's main weakness is he couldn't accept himself. Yusuke did not like being perceived as weak, anything but that, so he would always put on this tough persona so others wouldn't see that he was actually cracking on the inside. But thankfully, we have an actual manifestation of Yusuke in Pooh. This cute, adorable little furball is Yusuke's real self. So Yusuke would act all tough on the outside, but it was Pooh who showed his friends his soft and vulnerable side, all of which Yusuke was terrified for other people to see. And this was brilliant writing by Togashi. He is doing social commentary on how men are perceived in the world, where men shouldn't show their emotions and how it's damaging to young boys and young men if you bottle everything up. Toguro and Yusuke are alike in many ways, but at the same time they juxtapose each other. Toguro is the manifestation of what society has deemed a man. No emotions, does his job, provide, but in the end he is hollow inside. And Yusuke is trying to bottle up his emotions, not show people that he has weaknesses and doubts because he is afraid of what people would think of him. But Yusuke tackles this problem head on in his training with Genkai, where she gives Yusuke the Spirit Orb. And the Spirit Orb is the greatest challenge Yusuke has ever faced in his life, both physically and mentally. This orb is tearing apart Yusuke's body, and it's his decision to keep going or to give up. And when Yusuke's at the end of his rope thinking he can't go on, Pooh steps up to help him. And in a scene that completely destroys me, we see Pooh carrying water for Yusuke. And Pooh has gone through all the same damage that Yusuke has, but he is still getting up and trying to fight for Yusuke. Pooh represented Yusuke's growth. Before, Yusuke would have given up, but now Pooh doesn't know how to give up. Yusuke cried saying this because he wasn't living up to his own ideals. Pooh represented who Yusuke truly was, and the Yusuke we see now is how he portrays himself to the world. Yusuke was finally tired of half-assing his way through life, and he was tired of letting himself down. He was ready to put it all on the line for those around him, and he was ready to be vulnerable and show that people do matter to him, and that he cares about the bonds he is creating. And in doing so, Yusuke was finally able to accept himself, save Pooh, and complete the task of absorbing the Spirit Orb. Unfortunately, good things don't last too long, because shortly after, Genkai was murdered by Toguro. And just when Yusuke found a semblance of who he was and accepting his emotions, Genkai died and he started to close himself off again. At first, Yusuke acted like he accepted Genkai's death by shooting a spirit gun in her honor, but then never told Kuwabara that Genkai died, because he was figuring out how to even deal with loss. Genkai was more than a teacher to him. She was like the mother Yusuke never had. And when Yusuke lost Genkai, he started closing himself off again. And what's so amazing about Togashi's writing is he incorporates emotions into his power system. And how emotional you are and how in tune you are with your own emotions is how you access your power. And Yusuke had all this power, but because he closed himself off and was in his own head, he couldn't access the power he needed to beat Toguro. So Toguro had to find a way to pull this out of Yusuke. Another person had to die. And Yusuke tried as hard as he could to summon the power he needed to beat Toguro, but he couldn't. So Toguro had to pick out Kuwabara to be the next sacrifice to unlock the hidden potential in Yusuke. And I know it's very cliche that in battle manga and other media that the main protagonist gets their power from friendship, but the way Togashi organized this is completely different from those scenarios. This whole series we see Yusuke has been struggling to identify with people and to let people into his life, and he's walls around himself. So for him not to be able to tap in the power that he needs is very realistic, because this whole series, Yusuke has done nothing but build walls for those who try to get near him. So asking him all of a sudden to tear down those walls and access emotions he has closed off is a very arduous task for him to do. That's why he needs that external stimulus of someone dying to shock him. And when Kuwabara died, all of Yusuke's barriers collapsed. And Yusuke was finally able to access the power that lay dormant in himself. What's so great about this series is it undermines all these tropes that we thought would happen. I thought when Yusuke saw Kuwabara died, he would go on a rampage and beat Toguro. But after Kuwabara's death, Yusuke was the calmest we have ever seen him in the story. He is lamenting the fact that it is his fault that Kuwabara died, and he has to live with that for the rest of his life.
You're a mess. I'm gonna mess your face up so bad the kittens won't even look at you. That's it! My head is a trampoline is where I draw the line. Cause I'm Kuwabara, and in case you guys forgot, I got a sword. Beat him for all of us. You're a Mishi.
For someone who was so scared to show people who he really was, he is now being so open and vulnerable with the toughest guy he has ever faced in Toguro. And I think it's beautiful that Yusuke is able to take a step back and reflect on Kuwabara's death and how it's his fault that he wasn't strong enough to save him. But from now on, he won't let that happen again, and he understands the mistakes he made today. And with the power-up, he's able to beat Toguro and put an end to the Dark Tournament. But coming out of the Dark Tournament, Yusuke has a newfound perspective on life and how he views bonds and friendships. At first, Yusuke would put on a persona and never show the world who he truly was, but now he is comfortable being himself no matter what other people may think. And I think that's a beautiful message that young boys need to hear, that it's okay to be yourself and that you don't need to be put in a box of what people think you should be. Thank you guys so much for watching, and please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.